I'm going to steal a quote from one of my favorite cartoons, DuckTales, where,
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Scrooge McDuck says, like, work smarter, not harder. So to me, it's kind of going to that instead of going like nose deep and trying like, no, I'm going to pump this out. Like, you take a step back, you reevaluate, you assess it, you strategize and prioritize. And to me, that's the M in project management. Like, to me, that's your job.
Hello and welcome back to the workshop presented by App & Martin. In this episode, we sat down with Senior Project Manager Roy Skeet and Manager of Vancouver Engineering Robert Lew. They are both long-standing employees of Applin, with Roy joining in 2007 and Robert joining in 2017. Today, we discuss the ways in which they foster work-life balance and how their priorities have evolved over time, both personally and professionally. It was a great conversation, and I hope you all enjoy.
So guys, I'd like for each of you guys kind of to start. Just give me a brief background about yourselves, how long you've been in the industry, where'd you grow up, school, kind of all that stuff, how long you've been at Applin.
Sure. I guess I'll go first.
Yep.
I was born in Vancouver, born and raised East Van. I went to high school in East Van, went to UBC, graduated 2010, and then I worked for a company that was actually doing transportation engineering for 2 years and switched to water, wastewater. Worked in North Van and joined Applin in 2017. That's kind of my background and been working here ever since.
Born and raised in the Metro Vancouver. I'm an 83 model, so went to high school with Terry Fox and Poco. Got my degree in BCIT. That was in 09, but I started with Applin as a summer student in 07. They were nice enough to take me on. And then, once I graduated, I've been working pretty much ever since. Starting off in the Surrey office and now migrating my way to the Vancouver.
So how did you guys can you speak about a little bit about how you guys got into engineering and why you chose this field? Was it maybe your parents were involved in maybe, again, kind of like the same sort of role? They were engineers or they were math and science nerds, and then that's how it kind of came to you? It was all what you've known all your life, or was it something you saw on TV, you just like to enjoy building, stuff like that? Like, speak to a little bit to how you guys kind of got involved in this field.
So my parents tell me this, I don't remember it, but they said when I was a kid, I told them I wanted to be an engineer because I was like really into Lego and stuff.
Very interesting job to say you wanted to be as a kid. Maybe they just told you that and that was
Well, I probably forgot it. Like in high
Parent
school.
influence.
Yeah. They told yeah. But actually, went through school in high school, wanted to be like a car mechanic because you're really into cars and stuff at the time. But university kind of did the regular thing is, pick what you're good at. So I was good at physics, so I went into physics. And then after second year, actually, and this is parental influence, my dad had a really deep talk with me about like what my future's gonna look like.
The life talk.
Yeah. And it's like, it actually made a lot of sense. It's like, what am I gonna do with a physics degree? Like work in a lab or be part of academia or something. It didn't really appeal to me. So I made the transfer to engineering at that time. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then just, picked civil because like everybody, I dreamed of building bridges and
Awesome.
that's how I landed in civil.
Yeah. My journey actually was always, I was going to be a marine biologist actually when I was in high school. I was always fascinated with sharks, but I kind of had a similar life talk where, when I got to know a little bit more of the industry, I realized that living a life as a marine biologist was very hard. You're just going from grant to grant. So this was roughly around like the middle school time. So around high school, I realized that, I still like to draw, do little SketchUp. So I'm like, maybe architecture is the way to go. Mm-hmm. So in high school, I started to dive into drafting and CAD design and all that stuff. And it really took off. So at high school, I actually was thinking that I was going to be an architect. I did a little co-op with them. The company was called Killick, Metz, Bone and Rose, and they were the ones who designed our high school. Terry Fox, so the school hooked me up with them. And they said that, well, to be an architect, you need a master's, but so you need to get your bachelor's in something. So, and to me, it made sense. Well, why don't I get it in engineering? Because wouldn't engineering be a better architect? So that's why I got into it. But the more I got into engineering and, thought more about the industry of architecture, the more I actually liked the nitty-gritties of the engineering as opposed to architecture. So
Yeah,
that's
you
where I
kind
stayed.
of are able, not that you have more control, but you're able to almost see the nuances kind of behind the
Yeah.
scenes as to how the actual project gets
Exactly.
to be towards the end.
Yeah, I would say that even the experience with the co-op kind of, because you do the look around and you see like the happy faces compared to the unhappy faces, and I just remember that in the office there was maybe a lot of unhappy faces because they were just grinding out. So I think I got a little sour spot at that industry. I'm like, well, maybe architecture is not.
Yeah, maybe let's go to the guys that are smiling.
Yeah, a little bit more, right? So.
Well, I mean, the film industry like paints a very rosy picture of what an architect is.
100%.
You go in with the wrong expectations.
Yeah. I did look into it a little bit more. Like when I did get it, I remember reaching out to UBC Architecture to see what would be that application process. And they said, what's your portfolio? And, and that was the other thing is I, looked at all the sketches and I realized everything was a box. Everything was square and not curves and everything. So I'm like, well, maybe I'm not as good of an architect.
Yeah, maybe I'm not as creative as what I thought I was. A little rigid.
I'm realizing I'm just making another box again, building. So, I kind of realized that, no, maybe engineering and efficiency is my way to go.
Yeah, you're
Very
too
cool.
practical.
As you guys have kind of talked about your past and stuff, let's talk about your present now and your current roles and responsibilities. I think of the 4 episodes we've recorded so far, you guys have the most experience, I would say, out of the people we've interviewed and the guests we've had. So I'd be very interested to kind of
Odd for you to say because I remember being the most youngest in the so
That's a good thing. That's why. So if you guys could talk kind of a little bit about your roles and responsibilities on a day-to-day as, I guess, the current title holders or positions that you guys are in now.
Right. So yeah, I mean, my day-to-day is pretty interesting. I'm kind of straddling the line between PM and branch manager, kind of taking on this role relatively recently. So, I'm working pretty closely with Derek, like taking a lot of the admin tasks for the branch, like hiring, facilities management, going over like financials and all that stuff. So it's very interesting right now, learning a lot, but I'm still managing projects in a team. So just kind of providing high level oversight to each of the individual kind of team units I have under me. And just making basically like kind of being the bumpers on the side of the bowling alley so that they don't go too far off. But
It's a nice way of putting it.
give
Actually,
them
where
enough
you're able
freedom.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy because as the project manager, still kind of within those realms of mentoring a team of junior engineers trying to get into their development, trying to make sure that they don't fall off the ledge too much. A little bit more on the ground. I would say a lot of my work day to day is still dealing with a lot of contractors, construction. So with the kind of nature of projects that we do, they require a lot of on-site presence. So I do find that I'm probably stepping out in the field a little bit more than I want to, especially on the rainy days kind of thing. But, it's that usually encompasses the day to day.
Yeah. Now, moving on from that, obviously, again, now with all these different tasks you guys are taking on, and again, the different roles that you guys have played either in the past and now in the present, that obviously comes with a lot of different balancing and a lot of different stresses that you've either dealt with or that you're currently dealing with and that you will deal with in the future. Can you guys get a little bit into, I guess, the work-life integration that you kind of now are currently in, and then if you can go into how it has evolved maybe from your past.
Like it's already a balancing act before having a kid, like trying to balance life and work. And now with a kid, it's like life, work, and kid, which is a very time-consuming thing. But I mean, it's not what you're truly asking, but like the way I look at it is the work-life dichotomy doesn't really exist. Because like
That's exactly kind of what
Yeah.
I want to hear you guys speak about a little bit, right? Because the way I look about it, or the way I think about it, and how I work nowadays, is that I don't like to people talk about, okay, I have work on one hand and
Right.
the way I like about it is if you're able to put them not together because you don't want your personality to just be work, right? But if you're able to have the mix and mingle, and it's not that this is only work and that this is only life, right? I think splitting up the two almost creates a little bit more.
Yeah, it kind of creates like
Dynamic.
a false conflict where it really isn't one. So like, my kind of philosophy on it is like take for example, people that get really into a certain sport or something, and then they're so into it and they practice it so often that they find like life truth in it. Like they learn how to live life through it. Like think of like a martial artist that like cultivates discipline or like their mental fortitude and all that stuff, and like really understands themselves and their limits because they're pushing them all the time. I feel like that's kind of how I approach work, where it's a vehicle. It's work, yes, but it's also a vehicle in which like I'm spending like 8+ hours a day. Why not use it as a way to develop myself and sharpen myself and push my limits and test myself in all these different
Exactly,
ways?
because then you're able to take what you've developed here and then also apply it to your personal life. And
Oh,
same
totally.
thing-
Yeah, yeah.
And then same thing as what you've done in your personal life, you're able to bring some of those, whether, I don't know, for example, if you have to be a little bit more patient at home, or you need to be a little bit more disciplined at home, right? I find that those skills that you use in the home, you're able to bring it to work. Same thing, but like having your desk organized and stuff like that. If your desk is more organized at the office and stuff like that, then you're more likely to have your home space more organized.
Well, yeah,
And
yeah.
everything kind of just goes all together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, definitely, like for me, I find that there's like, the joy, you overcome the joys, like, kind of doing the analogy of like whether it's, a sport or like I'm thinking of it as like a musical instrument. You find the joy in, overcoming something and then building off of it. So you do enjoy spending all the majority of your time. That's how I've kind of come to look at it. Like for me, engineering is the objective is to solve problems. Like I remember having someone come to me, it's just like, oh, why is this project having so many problems? Like, buddy, that's our job.
That's
like,
it.
That's literally our job.
That's the definition of what we're trying to do.
Exactly,
You
right?
want to take one thing and
exactly.
evolve it to something else.
Exactly. If there was no problems, then you probably wouldn't need any
Your job
engineers,
wouldn't
right?
exist.
So for you to ask for something with no problems means you're kind of like phasing yourself out of existence. So, I think for me, it was just trying to find that joy, which, makes it worth the effort and makes it worth the fun into getting it and incorporating that. But you're right. Like I think especially now, the lines have blurred a little bit in terms of like when is work time and when is personal time. And there's good and bad to that. Like, allows for more flexibility, in my opinion, to do your day-to-day of the life. But at the same time, maybe the areas that would have been reserved for playtime may have been work time. But to me, it's just adapting to an ongoing time of, being flexible. But it's that more integration in my mind that we were just chatting about.
Yeah. Now, working off of that, would you say, have you set any more boundaries personally when it comes to work time, playtime in your personal life? Like, are you, say, for example, is it, okay, I'm only going to be, and I know it's obviously very different if it's busy season or if there's a big project or something like that, but say, for example, would you have a hard stop time for work and after that you're almost done? Versus, okay, now, say on a Saturday, I'm going to turn my emails off and I'm not going to answer anything. Do you have any of those personal boundaries that you like to keep where it's like, I need this for myself? Me personally, whenever I go after I'm done for work, the 1 hour that I do when I go to the gym or something like that or do an activity, I always turn my phone on to mute, and I always try to not answer anybody during that time because that's my 1 hour kind of to myself where I like to reflect, just take my time. If I'm working out with someone, that's like my time to socialize with them, talk, joke around, right? It's the one time where you're able to kind of escape whatever you've been doing and like let loose a little bit.
Yeah, that's the interesting question. It's definitely evolved. I would say before I almost had like no boundaries. It's like just work when the work needs to be done and just grind it out. But now with the kid at home, it's very imperative I'm home to like help with dinner time and bedtime and all the routine. And obviously there are times when I'm away, but the limitation is if there's no specific reason like a dinner or like an evening event that I have to be away from my family, I am not away from my family. And that's pretty much the limitation. And after kiddos to bed, then it's back to if I have to work, I work after that.
Yeah. So again, it's like managing basically, right? It's like now you have as you're kind of dealt a different hand, I guess you could say, or as circumstances change, then obviously your limits to yourself, whereas before you may not have had limits.
Yeah.
Right now you're able to be like, well, now I have, and I'm not saying it's bad, but now you have like, you know what I mean, a personal obligation where it's like, no, now I have to, you know what I mean? That's my number one priority, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before it would have been a little bit differently.
And that's a great word. I think it's like priority is like before for me it was a little unclear what truly like the priority list was.
Yeah.
But now it's a lot clearer, and yeah, the kid is a very top priority. So that part is very non-negotiable.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like for me, it's, he goes to bed at 8, so after that, it's kind of open up the floodgates to get it. But even that, like, there's a little bit of time for, me and the wife to have our dinner. So usually it kind of starts at like 10 o'clock to help finish that. But
Yeah.
for me, I mean, my philosophy is that like prioritizing and recharging your batteries is also very important, because like I've gone through a segment where you're not recharging your batteries and your work actually kind of suffers as well. So I think prioritizing that and understanding what recharges your batteries as well is very, very important. There was a stint there where it's just like, okay, maybe if I do this, reading philosophy will be a better recharge, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah,
I'm
it's like
sure-
if it was a false like.
well, exactly. And so that was kind of my personal learning development, is that, maybe I didn't need to learn about Noam Chomsky's, that's not.
Linguistics?
Yeah, exactly.
that actually might
Like,
not make me more relaxed.
Yeah, exactly. It's so.
Put you to sleep. Man.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, so understanding, for me, it was kind of like a personal growth of trying to understand, like, no, these are the things that really help me recharge my batteries, so you could be more effective and, take advantage of that.
So what does recharge your batteries?
Honestly, oddly enough, going to the gym, going for runs actually is probably my go-to one. It's probably the most best bang for your buck, because you could just, because you're not obliged to look at the phone at all. You're just going for a run. You got your music on, and
I want to say you're not going like this, checking your emails.
yeah,
While you're
exactly. So, but yeah.
So I guess now that you mentioned again, like the stress and the timelines and all of that, and you mentioned before that you did go through a little bit of a period where you were almost, maybe it sounded like you were taking on too much, or you were doing too much, where it was like a negative cycle where it was like, okay, maybe if I do more, I'll actually do better. But it was actually like, well, I'm doing more, I'm doing worse. I'm doing more, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, right? So how would you say you deal kind of now with those stresses when I do have, say, 4 or 5 things due on Friday, and they actually almost probably have to be done by Friday. They can't be pushed off to Monday, right? How do you deal with that stress?
For me, what I do is I kind of lean heavily and look to that support to really help out, and realizing that this position is built off of a lot of support and a lot of help. And it's the idea that, I think the lessons learned is that you do what you can. You can't do it all. So it's the idea that, you just have to regroup, refocus, and see what can be done to help out the situation, and learn to prioritize. I think that's, the main thing is
Nobody's Superman, right? Like you could, again, you're only one person, right? I only have X amount of hours within a day that I can actually do to physically complete these tasks, right?
Yeah.
So,
So I think for me, if that's a situation that I've come, and there's also an opportunity to kind of do lessons learned, because like I also looked at it like, if I had 6 things due on Monday, I always kind of take a step back and like, did I say that? Was this my situation that I've caused this? So there's a little bit of lessons learned on that as well for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like you can't do it all, and I think the way to alleviate the stress from the situation is, first of all, like understanding what's realistic, right? If we're talking about 5 deadlines on Friday, is that realistic or not?
Exactly.
If it is, then it shouldn't be stressful, right? And if it's not, then the next step is to do what you need to do to make the expectations for yourself and the client or the city or whoever you're dealing with reasonable on both ends. So if it can't be done, tell them it can't be done as early as possible.
Yeah.
And once the new kind of target is established, just work towards that, and just make sure, do your diligence to make sure that new target is reasonable. Yeah. And the stress is gone, right? If it's reasonable and you can do it, then you just need to.
Well, if it's within your control and you're able to hit what you targeted for, exactly, then it should just basically fall into your day to day, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to steal a quote from one of my favorite cartoons, DuckTales, where Scrooge McDuck says, like, work smarter, not harder. So to me, it's kind of going into that, instead of going like nose deep and trying to like, no, I'm going to pump this out. Like, you take a step back, you reevaluate, you assess it, you strategize and prioritize. And to me, that's the M in project management. Like, to me, that's your job. That's what you have to do. And that's one of the skill sets that I think maybe not have been, established for me personally when I was in school, because everything is so linear and you just go through the assignments and you just plug away. It's kind of funny, because like when you think about it, it's like the total opposite of what they tell you in school, because they tell you that, like, do it all yourself and everything. Don't rely on others. And I get that because, me and Robert have chatted about this before. You want to have that technical foundation. You don't want to rely on too many people because at the end of the day, you still got to know your stuff. But, once you get to a point where like you've locked in that skill set, it's more just, spinning those plates accordingly and making sure that they're all effective. And to me, that's kind of the name of the game right now.
Yeah, and it was funny that you mentioned that like in school and everything is very linearly, because even now when we have like younger juniors starting and they ask me like, oh, how were you able to whatever, how did you kind of do this? With my experience, I would say my first year and a half was actually just learning how to do things as like an actual like adult, right? Right. It's a completely different thing than when you're in class, right? Because again, I may have not been the best student, but I may have like skipped a class or two in my life. It was very different. You were able to I know what I have to get done and I know how exactly I'm going to do it.
Yep.
Versus work, you might have 5-6 things come up, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an email, whether someone comes over to your desk, right? And then there goes 2-3 hours that you might have actually thought you accounted for something else, right? So I think the management, like you said, just zooming out, taking in tasks, and then figuring out exactly like listing out what your priorities and how to actually deal with them. I think it's super important.
Yeah. No, it is interesting because to me that is kind of the natural growth of, for me, like in the engineering field, because like again, when I go back to school, like you're really into the details of it. And that's part of the exercise as like I've learned through the years, is that recognizing the forest from the trees and like taking a step back and trying to understand. Because if you had to do it all right now, you can't achieve that. So that's kind of part of the skill set where you use your experience to kind of better understand what can be done now, what needs to be done now, what can be done later, or better yet, how do you communicate that this is coming later so it satisfies your client, right?
All right, so now just to add to a little bit of the stress of this episode, we're gonna do a little bit, again, as you guys have been here, the most experience, I guess, of our guests. We're gonna do a little bit of Aston Martin trivia, and we're gonna see how well you're able to use that experience. And
Is the answer Applin Martin?
no, so the way it's gonna work, so they're all numbered questions. So again, we're gonna do Price is Right style. So it's gonna be closest without going over.
Okay.
So I guess if you want to just turn your sheets over, and then we'll just go in order. We'll just write down a number.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys want to copy off each other, who you think is better.
Are we all going to do $1?
Yeah. I know you guys are doing friendly. Yeah,
$1, Bob. Poor Bob. Rest in peace.
But we'll go one by one, and then we'll make the last question worth 2, just to keep it interesting.
Sure.
All right. So question number 1 will be, how many offices does Applin Martin have countrywide?
Are we talking about departments or actual physical offices?
Offices. Now again, Derek came up with them. I don't know about the technicalities or what the tiebreaker is, or exactly the official definition of the questions, but we're just gonna roll with whatever numbers he kind of gave me here.
Okay. Trying to count in my head, but I was like, forget it.
Yeah.
Gut feeling.
All right, Robert, do you want to start?
Oh, no.
10.
8.
All right, that one is to Roy, 1-0. There are 9 offices.
Oh, I was gonna write 9.
All right, so 1-0, Roy. Question number 2: the number of business groups.
Oh,
That's
okay, well,
that's
it's
the
greater
that
than
was-
nine.
yeah,
It's greater
that's
than
the
nine.
department.
That was
That's the
your-
department.
Yeah.
Okay. Business group. So
All right, both done?
Yep.
All right, Roy, we'll have you start this time.
13.
12.
13.
Oh.
2-0.
13.
Wow.
Oh,
So
no.
he might have studied. I didn't know he was and he was the surprise guest. All right, we're gonna get a little bit more difficult here.
Bring it on.
The number of current employees at Applin Martin.
Closest without going over.
Closest without going over.
Including survey.
Again, I don't know the exact definition, but I guess if
think
they're employed, we'll count them.
Including. Okay.
All right, Robert, no pressure, but you gotta kind of.
I gotta-
We need this for the sake of it.
300
Roy, don't just put like 3,000. Just to.
326.
I put 250.
All right, you went over by 2. It's 324.
Oh my
Yeah. So
I knew it was the
3-0.
I knew it was the 300 range, so I just like gave myself a little bit of buffer. You gotta do strategy. Remember,
I've
it's-
never watched The Price is Right. I'm just trying to get a float.
Oh man! So for me, Price is Right meant staying home because like my mom worked from Tuesday to Saturdays,
Right.
so she had Monday off. So like in grade school, she'd
go
be
home
like,
for lunch.
yeah,
from
so
12
or
o'clock to 12:30.
or on Monday, yeah, exactly. Like or even on a Monday morning, I'd be like, I'm not feeling very good. It's like, it's okay. You can stay home.
Yeah.
So that was what I watched, like, at 10 o'clock every day, every Monday. Well, not every Monday, but, on the Mondays that I got
A
to
little
stay
bit of
home.
strategy involved.
It was great.
See, I only had like the bunny ears on my thing, so I had CBC and CTV.
Gotcha.
That's it.
Gotcha.
It was a
Gotcha.
sad upbringing.
No, not at all.
All right. Question number 4. The year Appleton Martin was founded.
Oh my.
55 years ago.
I was going to say, so now it's a little bit of...
Oh.
So a little bit
It's
of
one-
mental,
it's one of
a little
those
bit of
math
mental
questions.
math. We are in engineering, so it's you
carry
want to do a quick
carry
one?
the Y.
Yeah.
68.
68.
There you go. So point for each of you.
Oh my god.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Second last question. So it's 4-1. Yeah. Second last question here. So we'll go the number of service types that Appleton Martin currently has.
Service type. Sorry. Maybe don't understand.
Definition of services that we provide.
Oh, I see.
All right.
Who's answering first?
Gonna start? Robert?
Sure, 5.
I said 5 too.
There you go.
Engineering,
Is it?
planning,
It's 5.
architectural, environmental.
I can't win that.
Sorry, do you want to name them?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of the. Oh, and geomatics. There you go. Yeah. Engineering, planning, architectural, environmental, and then there's surveying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, and then a little bit the last one. I guess Roy already won it, but we'll go for
Make it
make it worth 4
make it
points.
worth 4.
Okay, we'll make it worth 4. So we'll just do it. Yeah, it was close
Make it
enough.
worth-
We'll
This is
give it
like
to
Family
you.
Feud,
I mean, you're
where
only you were
this is-
off only by 2. You're
Yeah,
technically-
I
yeah.
technically was way closer.
Yeah, the average of your answers was a lot
This is like
closer.
Family
All right, so
Feud
let's
where
just
you
do
could
it.
be like kicking ass like the whole thing, and then the last round is like triple score, and you're like, what the heck? That's not fair.
You're quoting another game I never watched.
This one will actually do close without going over because
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
pretty surprising number, and I think
Oh.
you guys will be super impressed by it.
Okay.
Okay.
The number of active projects countrywide.
Oh, that's a
Appleton
good
Martin.
question. That is a good question. Active, like currently active.
Currently active.
Currently active.
Currently
Ooh.
active.
Project folders
Ooh.
that are being.
Ooh.
Oh, okay. So that includes like projects from like way back that just like haven't been closed too. All right.
See, to me, this was always the joy of engineering, is that I always thought you could put an engineer in a spot and they should be able to
just do it?
No, like within a reasonable level of accuracy, like take certain points, and like I always thought that skill set was always really cool. So I
Yeah.
always kind of. Which really helps in when contractors are always trying to bullshit you too. It's like, oh, that's
Like,
gonna
wait,
be,
hold on, let me
that's
think
gonna be
about this for a second.
$100,000 for a box.
Yeah.
So closest without going over.
Closest without going over.
All right. Don't look at the.
He's gonna go with like 1.
No, of course not.
All right, Roy, you want to start?
10,000.
10,000. 2,800.
All right, so you guys are both a little bit off, but it's 1,260.
way off.
Oh, so I don't. Oh man, so I don't even win because I don't even get any points. I
Yeah.
didn't even. save
Active, but
myself.
active projects, like things that have been.
We might have to speak with Derek about the
Okay.
actual
See,
definition of the active
I was
projects,
going to
but-
like looking at because we just did the archiving. I'm like, there's a lot of open projects.
Well, that's
in
what
our-
I mean.
Maybe our office just has like a lot of.
Well, that's what I mean. Because like,
Yeah,
I mean,
you might have to get him to actually fix up the definition.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
1,000.
But 1,268 that are currently being worked on. Which
It's a lot.
should've
Of,
did-
I thought it was pretty.
it's a lot of
Should've did
invoices.
one.
That's
I
a lot of
should've did
invoices
one.
they have to do. Have to get sent out.
All right. Well, hats off to the winner.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you,
Well deserved.
thank you.
So no, good. That was honestly it was a cool little exercise to go through because then you're able to see kind of the experiences, I guess, of everybody countrywide, and just to see how kind of Appleton's grown, I guess, from just the Vancouver area, then out west, kind of to where we are now with Toronto, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's been very neat, for lack of a better word, to kind of see that, because like when I first joined, it was just a very small, like not a small branch, but like it was just a single. And my hat's off to the group who really spearheaded that, like the Ed Fujis and the David Chans of the world, who really took everything under their belt to kind of grow the business and the company. Or even the leadership that we had before, like the Andrew Bakers, like he's been the vice president since the beginning, and a lot of his expertise and experience. And that was always the thing that I really enjoyed with, is that you get to wear all these different hats and you get to be a part of it, right? To me, an engineer was always the guy who knew, the smartest guy in the room, or at least always should have the most knowledge. And, I like the idea that you can understand all aspects of the business for that. And I've always,
Exactly. You're able to touch all the different parts. You may not know everything about every single part, but you're able to understand to a certain degree as to what goes on kind of behind the scenes and what goes on during the construction phase, right?
Yeah. And if you didn't, then, you say you don't, but then you get a chance to learn and grow upon it, right?
Exactly. So what part of engineering, and then obviously we'll go talk specifically about Applin keeps you coming back every day?
I think actually that's exactly what I was kind of touching on. I think it's the idea that you get to have such a variety of the industry. You're not landlocked into, a particular skill set or field that, you have to do day in, day out. So for me, the special thing with Applin was the idea that, you could take lessons learned from the field, like have a morning meeting with a contractor or a fight over something as simple as contaminated soil, and then take it back in the afternoon and do a detailed design review. We're like, well, I learned a lesson on that one. I'm going to change that on my detailed design right now. So I like the idea that there's that range on the day-to-day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. For me, it's the mentorship. So like my biggest thing, my biggest joy day to day is kind of seeing and guiding the development of the people that I'm working with. So that's what keeps me coming back.
Yeah. And I agree definitely, like between what you guys have both said, I think as I've started, I think again, not to go back to the stresses, but that was kind of, I guess, what has made me almost enjoy it more to where I am now. Now, again, I only have just coming up on 6 years of experience, but I mean, being able to kind of touch on every different part, being able to just talk about the different disciplines within of exactly what we do, right?
Yeah.
And then being able to not only do that, learn everything, but then being able to share that knowledge with young and up and coming people that are just getting started and asking like, oh, what exactly do we do here? And it's like, well, you can do everything if you really want, right?
Yeah.
If you really want, you're able to do anything and everything, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, look at this. Like, if somebody told me 13 years ago that Roy is part of an engineering firm, he'll be part of a podcast, I'd be like, what are you talking about?
No.
First of all, I'd be like, what the hell is a podcast? But,
Yeah.
it's, but yeah, no, I think it just speaks to the idea that there's a lot of experience out there that you can be, I've always said the opportunities are there, and if you want it, and they've always been very willing to share those opportunities. So it's always been great.
Awesome. Now moving back, I guess, a little bit more kind of into your past with this question. What was your welcome to engineering moment? It could be something that you carry with now where you're like, wow, I'm actually in the discipline now and I'm dealing with the perceived big boys and big girls of the business. It could be a lesson that you still carry with you today that you'll never forget, right? But what was that one moment where you're like, oh, shit, I'm here and I'm actually going to be at the table with them kind of sharing my knowledge and stuff?
It's a good question. I think back to actually my first project with Applin that I was running, because in my previous company, I was kind of like jack of all trades, just helping other people out, but never really taking charge or anything. And then the first project that I was kind of running on my own with Applin, I remember going to a meeting and the client and a bunch of other consultants kept asking me questions like, does this work? If we do this, will this solve the problem?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, people are actually
They're going to me?
relying on my opinion?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
man.
get to talk now?
Oh man, better think hard about these answers. But
Yeah.
that was really like kind of the moment where it's like, oh wow, it's like my input completely affects the direction this project's gonna go.
Yeah, because they're looking for you and your guidance and your expertise from what you've learned to make their next business decision and potentially like life decision, and how it's going to affect what they're going to be doing. With their stuff, so.
Mine came probably when I was about second or third year at EIT. I remember doing a design. It was, a straightforward design. It was like new curb and sidewalk for City of White Rock. But I'll never forget once we issued for construction, I got a call from the inspector. And this was the first time I've ever got a call from an inspector. And it's funny because like he was out in the field and I could hear the equipment and like, the beepings backing up in the background. Like you could that was the first time there was an audio cues that they were building what it is that I was, that I designed. And like, there was a conflict and he's just like, so what do you want to do? And that was for me the moment of just like, okay, yeah, this is when you gotta focus, you gotta make a decision, you gotta, own it and land on it. So I very, very much remember that call. The inspector was Rob Melander, and he was great because he knew that I was a junior guy, but he like helped me through the process. And but no, that was the moment for me. I realized that when it's one thing to create, a pretty drawing, but it's another thing to actually build off of it, right? And
yeah, that's the one thing too. It still like amazes me, even though now going through the construction process like multiple times, and the same thing with you guys, right? Is that it's one thing to be like, oh, I just hit submit on this email. I'll send it off to the planner. I'm done. What's wrong with it, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're actually building it, and then that's when it comes back. It's like, oh crap,
Shit.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like this is actually going to be up in the air. People are going to be using it. They're going to be walking on it every day. Cars are going to be driving over it every day, right?
Yep.
So
yeah. No, it's a fun time, and again, this is why I think I like the construction side as much as I do, because it's where it gets juicy.
Well,
Yeah.
you're good at it.
Now, looking back again on that, what would be any advice that you would give your younger self, or that you would like to pass on kind of to the next generation and then the next wave that want to be choosing the engineering field or the land development field?
Be okay with your limitations. Be okay to recognize when you're at a point where you're at your limit. You're either your technical knowledge, and I think saying it's okay to say no or I don't know, but like use that as an opportunity to learn. I think for me that would be my advice to my younger self or even junior, is just like try to understand your limitations and use that as an opportunity to kind of grow from.
That's a great answer. I'm gonna maybe piggyback on that a little bit, and the biggest advice I would give is kind of being able to determine, so along the lines of limits, is what you truly know versus what you kind of know.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to go through your first 4 years as an EIT or even beyond kind of knowing stuff because somebody else is kind of looking over your shoulder. You have a bunch of people to ask or a bunch of reference projects to be like, oh, they did this before, it should work.
Yeah.
But why? Really understanding why, because there's so many learning opportunities that I reflect on that I had missed, that I had to catch up on later, that, oh, okay, well, if I just told somebody I didn't know or asked a question or read the book because took the extra time to read the book a little bit more closely, I would have learned all these things before and not stumble on them now. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing too, right? When you're talking about what you reflect on now versus what you kind of looked at before, right? Is be again, it's been overlapping kind of with the previous episodes as well, right? Is be okay with what you don't know. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, right? Because nobody's expecting you to know 110% of what you actually don't know, right? Because unless you've experienced it or you've been told or you've leaned on somebody for something else, right? You're not going to know what you don't know.
Yeah. And it's hard though, because there actually is a stigma. I remember when I graduated from school, my mom was having issues with the light switch. Like, bro, you're an engineer. Figure it out. I'm like,
yeah, you can do it.
Oh my God.
it's not even my area. It's well, you give me a question on pipe, I'll maybe be able to help you out.
That was when did that happen to you when you graduated?
Of course.
All your friends, everybody you know, it's like,
Fix
oh,
it.
you're an engineer. You should know how to do this.
Yeah.
I deliberately avoid the escape rooms because there's so much added pressure on that, because you're like, bro, you're an engineer, figure this out.
It's always more pressure when you're in.
It's always more pressure, right? So I'm just like,
you problem solve, you can do it.
I'm 0-0 because I don't even want to try it. But it's, I think with that stigma and even internally, you kind of take that pressure. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to know this. And that's why I said being okay with your limitations and just look at it as an opportunity to learn is I think the best advice you can get.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add to that. I think this is what it's pretty much what you're saying, but the underlying lesson that needs to be learned is ego control, because so many of these issues, recognizing your limitations, you don't want to, because you don't want to admit that you're limited. Yeah. Recognizing what you know, what you don't know, you're scared to let other people know or ask the questions because you don't want them to think you're dumb.
Exactly.
But you're gonna be dumb later or now. So
exactly. I'd rather look dumb without knowing that there's not a consequence, but I'd rather be dumb now when it's fixable versus later when there might be a slight consequence or there might actually be a consequence.
Exactly.
Trust and credibility is probably one of the biggest currencies in our industry. And the thing is that you get more and maintain more trust and credibility with clients, municipalities, everybody that you work with, if you say, no, I don't know, or I'll have to get back to you. Because you may have fooled them once for just giving them a piece of information that was wrong. But if they find out that you're just going to spit out something just for the sake of argument, then that's kind of, not that you're blacklisted, but that will always kind of hang. We're just maybe I'm not.
Every answer needs a little bit more scrutiny from you after that.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's, that's your currency. And that's actually, again, another reason why I didn't enjoy engineering, because it's one of those things where, your experience is currency. That's, I would go to sleep with a little bit of trouble if I was in say, marketing, where you're always worried about the fresh face, new idea, right? Whereas engineering, your experience is currency. So I go to sleep a little easier. But then it rains heavily like it did the other night.
And then you see oh no. So All right, well, that was awesome, guys. That's what we got for today. Thanks again to Roy and Rob for joining us on this episode and
Thanks for
sharing your
having us,
knowledge, sharing your knowledge and experience. And thank you to the listeners for listening to this episode of The Workshop by Apple and Martin. Stay tuned for the next episode and have a great day.